Thou earth great and weary, or the Bullarto tractor pull. All I did was say, go, I said to myself for the 100th time. If I reiterated often enough, it would be a justification. I wasn't saying it to my wife, Fifi. She was slugged on diazepam. It was her preferred mode of flying. And the afternoon had, in any case, been eventful. We were on the long flight. We were going to wake up in Osaka. The day itself began, however, waking up in a bed and breakfast with a roaring view over the Wombat Forest Reserve. We were visiting my creepy brother Carl and his latest lover Cindy, immersed in the ecologies, community types. They had met at an anti-logging rally and it had become torrid. We would drive from there to the airport, leisurely, and touch down in Japan in time for the rising sun. The hitch in the gidget was the Bullarto tractor pull. This was the occasion for the invitation. The community would gather. It would be a warm and salubrious spring day. There would be an array of vintage tractors, a vegetarian barbecue, games for the kids, and the first community appraisal of the newly renovated church. Truly hellish. Attending was Fifi's idea, I insist. I had said, a tractor pull with Carl and Cindy, I'd rather have my eyes gouged out. Fifi said it sounded like rustic Australian fun. The bishop, as gay as May, was going to be there to smile upon the renovations and bless the winner of the pull-off. I considered Carl and Cindy city upstarts responsible for the rainbowification of formerly quaint rural locales. Carl was creepy, but my brother nonetheless. Stupidly, I felt obliged to visit before trotting off overseas. I was thinking about ancient Rome. I was reading K.G. Ghibli's gripping account of Sulla's campaigns. I had it in my bag. It was for long flights and bus connections, and I read a page or two in my slumbers and dream of legions and centurions and river crossings. Then I wake up and go for my morning walk with Latin designations in my head. I asked Fifi if she wanted to go for a walk in the fresh new day since we are in the countryside and the air is rousingly clean. She says, I'd love to, and leaps out of bed. Only joking. Did I mention that my wife is a French tennis champion? No? Well, probably because she's not. French, perhaps, if you call Canada French. Fifi didn't like moving much at all. Tennis? You're kidding. A morning walk in the tender forests? No thanks. I look at her beside me on the plane. Other than the fact that she'd stopped talking, it was hard to tell when she was slugged on diazepam and when she wasn't. There was a defunct railway line down from the B&B, now labelled the Reg Wade walking track. The line had served the mines but had been replaced by rumbling trucks in the final years of viability. I walked the early morning splendour. The bushland was crisp. There was a creek making noises under ferns. Gradually the wild surrounds drew me away from dreams of ancient Rome and back into the present. I'm thinking, Australia is somewhat different to Japan. In Japan, when you venture out from your B&B for an early morning forest walk, little Buddhas line the pathway back into a noble past. In Australia, in parts like the Wombat Forest Reserve, there is the overgrowth of some strange planet and no signs of any human history. The bird calls are otherworldly. The insect sprays are menacing in the sunbeams. Even when they have wet feet, the eucalypts ache for fire. Carpets of black wattle seedlings were reclaiming the banks of the track. I wander longer than I should. Eventually I reached the site of the old mine, loosely encaged by fencing. Undeterred, I found a place to jump the fence and slosh around. There were pink leads rusting with rain against cut faces of stone. You could see where mighty forces had once folded over the sediment of long and untidy ages. Here and there, Pinus radiata reclaimed slopes. There were remnants of dredges. There were hollows and roughshod angles of granite. You could witness the full strata, every eon, the history of the earth's cold bones. Thou earth, great and weary. It was a morning reverie. After the walk, I returned to the B&B in time to check out, and we headed to my brother's, and from there we would be escorted to the tractor pull. We would need to leave early to catch our flight. It made for a crowded day. Did we really need to go to a tractor pull on the afternoon we were catching a 12-hour flight? You can sleep on the plane, they all say. But on the plane, there is a Jewish woman who is saying that her seat is being anti-Semitic. "You charge me how much for this?" she exclaims to the stewardess. She says her seat is lump-ridden and suggests it has been sabotaged. The stewardess offers her another, but the Jewess demands a seat first class as compensation for the affront. I am, as I say, thinking about ancient Rome. The Romans under Sulla marched into Greece and stole all their gods. On the first campaign, he turned Athens into a vassalage and took the whole Greek brains trust into industrious slavehood. Did you know that, reader? I suspect you didn't. It is the sort of thing that stirs my fortitude, looking out a plane window at 30,000 feet, or equally tempers my preoccupations at tractor pulls, or gazing into the torn pits of an abandoned mine in the solitudes of an alien forestscape. There are many circumstances, in fact, where it pays to recall that civilizations come and go and misbehave like rashes on the planet's gorgeous epidermis. Moreover, the man sitting yonder of Fifi in seat 52 is agitated, possibly an American. He has noticed that a lady several rows down has a baby. "If that bloody baby wakes me up," he says, gritting his teeth to himself, and then straightens himself up. He relates a horror flight where a baby screamed blue murder all the way to Peru. "They shouldn't let babies on planes," he snarls. I'm thinking it's going to be one of those sort of flights. The newly renovated church was a stone affair first constructed in the ragged days before the telegraph came through. It fell into ruin when the whole town decided the Second Vatican Council was a good reason not to go to church anymore. Of late, with funding from ecotourism, the Rainbow Coalition of locals had repaired it with a bout of working bees, and it was ready to go. The tractor pull was an annual happening. It too had been revived from the ruins of neglect a few years prior. Community types. "St. Gilligan," said Cindy, speaking of the holy dwelling. "Is he the patron saint of shipwrecks on desert islands?" I asked, dabbling with an archaic allusion to long-running cheap TV. "No," she said, "but he is the patron saint of wombats." "He's not," I said. "He is," said Cindy. "The bishop, gay as May, had a letter from the Pope," she explained. "It hadn't been ratified by a conclave or anything, but the Pope thought it was a good idea." "It is a letter from the Pope that started the Reformation," I said. "The what?" said Cindy. Did I mention how Cindy has a PhD in history from Princeton? No, I didn't. In any case, the tractor pull was at the church, which, now a community hub, no longer hosted congregations, but did still sport a cute rendition of the Virgin Mary, where the altar used to be. The Divine Feminine was much approved. The whole valley, as I say, was full of retired sociologists and blended families, and also bored hairy guys whose only mission in life was the resurrection of old tractors. A tractor pull puts them to the test. The event is reputedly jolly. I'm thinking about ancient Rome, but also in the dank, ferny, lizard-ridden understory of my mind, I'm thinking of that great scar of geology from the steam-driven mining days. Bullarto was once a wound in frightening forests. Carl and Cindy and their creative crew were putting the art back into Bullarto. When we turned up at the church grounds, it was, predictably, a dull undertaking, scraggy and incestuous. The bright point was that one of the ladies had made exceptional melting moments, and there was a plate of them unguarded at the south end of the lunch trestle. Fifi and I had had a row just before setting out. She refused to take her clothes off and have a shower until I searched the entire B&B for hidden cameras. There are no hidden cameras, I said. She had seen a documentary. My morning mood was reorganised in unwelcome ways. I had to search the whole place for hidden cameras. This was augmented when, arriving at St Gilligan's, with many tractors already puffing and chugging as the hairy guys milled about, there was an old acquaintance from university named Merrin Doo, who Fifi referred to as the curly-headed slut. Merrin knew Carl and was now a fringe psychologist. Why is she called Merrin Doo? Fifi wanted to know. I don't know, I said. I guess when she dies they'll call her Merrin Did. Fifi didn't laugh. Merrin Doo, moreover, had married a drip. I wanted to ask Merrin, why did you marry a drip? I decided not to go near her. Worse than this tension was the arrival on the scene of Cindy's ex, Trevor, and her many-sided son, the estranged Ignatius. They were there 3 minutes when the tractor chugging was punctuated with young Ignatius shouting, "I hate you, Mum! I hate you!" and running off to lock himself in the car. Cindy and Carl pursued him, pleading, "But Iggy, Iggy!" Did I mention that Carl was creepy? He played the creepy stepdad to Ignatius when he wasn't ogling teenage girls. When the bishop, gay as May, arrived, there was a slight fuss of ritual. He circumambulated St Gilligan's with an entourage. The vegetarian barbecue was a total misnomer. You can't barbecue a vegetable. Then came the tractor pull. I am saying to Fifi quietly, "As soon as this is over, let's get the hell out of here." We could cut across the wood end, scurry up the freeway and take the F-19 to the airport. It was at this hopeful juncture that Earl Kingsbury, a local notable, recognised me as Creepy Carl's long-lost brother and suggested that, as an outsider, I should give the go to the tractors, being an impartial starter. The hairy guys all agreed. I am thinking about ancient Rome and Osaka. Sulla had risen from poverty. He became a consul, a dictator, and then generously resigned his plenary powers after the constitutional reforms of the late Republic. His military campaigns were the stuff of manly legend. K.G. Ghibelli's account is stirring. Just before this, Carl put his foot in it. "Did you see Merrin Doo over there?" he says to me. Fifi looks up as if to say, "You mean that curly-headed slut?" Thinking it is safe, I say, "I see she is married," without mentioning the drip. "Remember what we used to say?" says Carl, creepy. Please no, I'm thinking. Carl recites the ditty. Merrin Doo did, and when she did all day, and when she did, she flipped her lid and all the boys would shout hooray. "Have you tried the melting moments?" I say to Fifi. "One of the ladies has made exceptional melting moments, and there's a plate of them unguarded at the south end of the lunch trestle." In fact, I announced, I was going to get one. This is why I evaded the preparations for the start of the pull. The hairy guys would assemble their metallic steeds in a line, each harnessed with a weight that would then have to be pulled over the finish line. First the tractors had to be fed fuel, then stoked into a frenzy, then letting go the handbrake at the starter's say-so, they would trundle and tarry, huff and puff, backfire and groan in a display of nostalgic engineering. Some of the tractors went back to the days of the working mine. Earl Kingsbury was there to explain the rules. He was armed with a mic and a neat PA. When I came back from my melting moment, it had all been settled and the tractors were revving up. Fifi was taking her diazepam ahead of time and washing it down with Chardonnay. Young Ignatius comes back from the car but refuses to acknowledge his mum. I walk up to Earl and he hands me the microphone. He irks me because he wants to marvel at how much I look like Carl about which I've been in denial my entire life. Is it a good idea to take diazepam just yet? I say to Fifi. The flight's not for another 4 hours. I'm waiting for her to tell me to mind my own business, when Earl, having handed me the loudspeaking apparatus, says matter-of-factly, giving me my instructions, all you have to do is say, go. Easy. I lifted the microphone to my mouth, give it a puff and say, go. Perhaps I should have said, testing, 1, 2, 3. Most of the hairy guys recognised the call as a fizzer and stayed steady. One of them, though, who was known as Grommet, heard the magic word and let it rip. His machine was premature. It was still restrained by a chained harness. The momentum suddenly lurched. The tractor belched. Someone gave a cry. He hit the throttle at the call and his beast snapped its moorings. The handbrake gave way. The chain snapped under the taut longitude and Grommet's monster heaved in a hurry, misguided. The driver couldn't find the pedal. The tractor went through the wall of St. Gilligan's and stopped in a miracle, just inches from the Virgin Mary. The community looked at me. All I said was go, I said. Inopportunely, as it happens. I look at the church with Grommet's tractor where the side wall used to be. The bishop was in a tiz. Oh, I'm thinking, that could be some structural damage. Cindy launched at me with a passion. You weren't supposed to say go yet, you idiot. Carl says to me, what did you do that for? Earl said to say go, I explained. But only after he says so, says Carl. There was some rainbow-coloured chaos. Fifi, just before the diazepam started to kick in, suddenly went religious. Oh my God, she yodels at me. We're about to get in an aeroplane and you destroy the house of God. Did I mention that my wife had lived as a Catholic nun in an abbey on the Isle de Fontenay? No? A nun? Give me a break. A Catholic maybe, by accident, or Catholic enough to consider desecrating a church with a tractor a bad omen. She says that if I hadn't been distracted by that curly-headed slut, it would never have happened. I'm thinking of ancient Rome. Sulla, of course, had his heavy-footed Germanic campaigns as well, and taught the Teutons a thing or two. But that was long ago. More recently, there's the problem of how to escape from the new ruins of St. Gilligan's and get to the airport. The best efforts of Gilligan and the skipper, I remembered, were always frustrated, even with the help of the professor. Grommet, hairier than most, came up to me and said, echoing community sentiment, fucking idiot. Earl said to say go, I explained. I stood there like a piece of bad furniture for a minute. I looked over and there was Merrin and her drip, firmly on the fringes of psychology, giving trauma therapy to the bishop. I think we'd better be going, I announced, if we want to miss the traffic. You can't leave now, Carl objects. Why, I say. Well, you can't walk out in the middle of a calamity. I don't know where community types get silly ideas like that, but I said to my brother, just watch me. Come on, Fifi, I said. The plan, after all, had been to scoot as soon as the tractor pull was finished, and I considered it over. The day got even better, though, when I realised that by now Fifi was legless. The diazepam had reached its objective without delay, helped along by numerous glasses of wine. Fifi was drowning her sorrows. I did feel bad. Should I speak to the bishop? I asked Carl. I wouldn't, he said. Cindy clearly felt I had an obligation to stay and help clear the rubble and save the Virgin Mary from further indignity. Leading Fifi to the car was a struggle. I strapped her in. Getting her out of the car at the airport was gymnastic. I had to get a courtesy wheelchair. By the time we reached check-in, she was drooling. Her eyes were rolling in her head. Did I mention how she was once a leading member of the Ladies' Temperance Society? No. The cantankerous American allergic to babies in seat 52 falls asleep and keeps the whole plane awake with his snoring. I'm gazing out the window into the dark cloud tops and say to myself, all I did was say go. I'll be saying it to myself all the way to the Japanese sunrise. Wasn't my fault. I had in fact snapped the expensive cable to the big TV when I was looking for hidden cameras, and I hope the bed and breakfast owners didn't find it and charge it to our account. It was Fifi's idea to go to the tractor pool, remember? Rustic Australian fun. I knew it would be the full rainbow of disaster. Did I mention how Carl was once a Boy Scout, as honest as the day is long, a perfect brother, a model and a mentor with no creepy inclinations? His first wife Susan said he was a sociopath, and it gave her night sweats thinking about it. I'm thinking about ancient Rome. The Romans didn't tarry. They built roads and aqueducts, amongst other things. It was in the year 87 BC that Sulla strode across the Adriatic for Thessaly with his 5 daring legions. He spared Athens abject humiliation, but took it all except the Acropolis on March 1st, 86 BC. Did you know that, reader? March 1st, 86 BC. Japan saunters somewhere in the far darkness. It is somewhat different to Australia. There are earthquakes. They pull all the temples down and build them fresh every couple of years. That's the way to do it. In Japan, everyone dresses like they are in training for space travel. In Bullarto, feral fashions hearken to the woolly yesteryear. I'm on the cusp. Fifi is in a coma. St Gilligan's has seen better days. Going round the long way, the Gulf of Thailand looks like an open-cut mine from 30,000 feet. The flora on the Reg Wade walking track is forever unfamiliar. No one has ever written works of loving and sweet haiku about those native flowers. In the old times, the foresters tackled an unknown realm. They hacked out tree stumps with their tractors. They cleared a path to the outcrop. Over short decades the miners came and went. The town swelled and shrunk again. I considered how that day I had gone from the pits of the earth's disfigurement to the pinnacles of jet-fueled aviation, trapped in a cabin with farty tourists going to flash Osaka. Thou earth, great and weary, at every elevation. I turned back to my Ghibli and his altogether observing rendition of Sulla's first Mithridatic campaign.